Hello everyone, my name is Kelly Johnson and I work in the curriculum team at NCFE. This webinar is for the Level 1 and Level 2 Technical Award in Graphic Design. The plan for this webinar is to give you a basic overview of the V Cert qualification, the externally examined assessment including key dates and recent information, the internally assessed coursework and what to do, and finally a summary of the resources that are available to help and support you. Let us begin though with an overview of the V Cert Level 1 and Level 2 Technical Award qualification. This is a vocational qualification and depending on your learners can be completed at Level 1 or Level 2. Do consider the learners you have though to decide which level they should be enrolled on. The grading covers Pass, Merit, Distinction and Distinction Star at both Level 1 and Level 2. The Level 1 and Level 2 Technical Award consists of an external assessment and internal assessments. They both contribute 50% of the final qualification grade. The external assessment is an invigilated exam paper and there is an assessment window during which the external assessment is to be completed, whereas the internal assessments or coursework involves generating a portfolio of evidence and is internally assessed but externally quality assured. While the exam covers both Level 1 and Level 2 learners, the internal assessment grading criteria is different for Level 1 and Level 2 learners. And furthermore, the Level 2 criteria is built upon the Level 1 criteria. If a learner is on the Level 2 qualification, then they need to have achieved a grade at Level 2 in each unit, including a Level 2 pass in the external exam. If it appears that a learner isn't going to achieve this, then they can be placed on the Level 1 qualification and all the work completed at Level 2 by the learner can just be mapped to the Level 1 qualification, so no additional work is required. You may be familiar with this chart that shows how the V Cert grading matches with the GCSE grading. Level 1 goes up to a maximum of grade 3, equivalent with a distinction star, and the Level 2 distinction star is equivalent to a maximum of a grade 8.5. The Department for Education has set this maximum as they want the top grades, i.e. the 9s, to be academic GCSE achievement only. V Certs fit into the open group or third bucket for performance points. This group can hold up to 3 qualifications depending on the qualification size and/or weighting, etc. V Certs can be delivered alongside other qualifications, but please do bear in mind the discount codes applicable to each subject area. So for example, if you were doing a traditional GCSE in graphic design and we're also delivering our technical award in graphic design with the same learners, then only one of those will count in the performance tables as their content is similar. Next, we will have a look at the external assessment in a bit more detail. The specification is divided into 4 units and each unit has 30 guided learning hours. Units 1 to 3 will be in the external assessment, so it is important that the teaching of these units has been completed before sitting the external assessment. Whereas the final unit is a portfolio of work that the learners must put together. It is a task-based exam assessing the application of knowledge and skills and is worth 90 marks in total. I'll talk a little more about this on the next slide. The external assessment is the same for Level 1 learners and for Level 2 learners, so they won't be put in for different exams. The exams aren't on a set date, but rather there is an assessment window during which the external assessment is to be completed. There are cut-off dates for booking learners onto that window, and this is usually 2 weeks prior to the start of the assessment window. So as always, do check the exam timetable on QualHub, as late registration fees can be incurred. There are 2 points in the year when the learners can sit their exams. These are usually near the start of a new year, so between mid-January and mid-March, and then in May or June time. There is one resit opportunity available, so it is best practice to plan this into your delivery. The key points for graphic design are that the exam is a practical exam over 10 hours and you are given a 4-week window in which to do that, and the use of computers and the internet is allowed. The questions in the external assessment don't vary much year on year. For graphic design, the first task requires learners to interpret the brief and come up with initial design ideas. In task 2, the learners need to experiment with those ideas, and it should be clear they have experimented with all 6 graphic design components. Task 3 is the creation of the final product, and task 4 is an evaluation where learners should give detailed conclusions about the appropriate use of graphic design components. The Chief Examiner's Report is where you can find the grade boundaries, and do bear in mind that learners need to achieve a minimum of a Level 2 pass in each internal assessment and the external assessment to achieve a grade on the Level 2 qualification. These are the most recent grade boundaries, and when compared with those from summer 2019, there was at most 1 mark difference. Now I'll go through the internal assessments. As already explained, there are 4 units for each qualification that need to be completed, and each of those units are internally assessed. Probably the easiest and most efficient method is to teach the unit content first, then issue the coursework for that unit, which should be undertaken independently by the learner. Then repeat with the next unit and so on, rather than teaching everything and then issuing all the coursework at the same time. Each unit has 3 to 4 learning outcomes that need to be taught, so let's look at an example for graphic design. Unit 1, which is an introduction to graphic design, there are 3 specific learning outcomes. Learning outcome 1 is to understand the components of graphic design. Learning outcome 2, experiment with the graphic design components. And learning outcome 3, review their graphic design experiments. Within the qualification specification, you will find all the relevant information for teaching the content, beginning with a unit summary. This gives the skills it is designed to develop, the guided learning hours for that unit, and what the learner should know by the end. The next section details the grading descriptors for the unit and includes some examples. So for a pass, they would need to describe colour, tone, line, composition, etc. with annotated visual examples, but for a distinction, they must also explain how the components can be linked, giving several examples. For example, understanding how design decisions affect each other in a final piece through the choice of line, layout, colour, etc. The next page details the assessment and delivery in more detail, and if you are a teacher, you will need to pay close attention to this page. Lastly, in the types of evidence section, it details what a learner must include and what they could include with suggested examples. You can write your own assignments, and there is guidance contained within the qualification specification, but we do have assignments already prepared and ready for you to use. You may wish to change aspects of the scenario so that it can be more suitably contextualized for your learners. And you can find the sample assignment task on the qualification specification page on QualHub. If you scroll down and click on the assessment tab, within that area you'll find those tasks. So let's take a look at one. This is a sample assignment for Unit 1, Introduction to Graphic Design. The first thing on the brief will be the scenario. This is designed to give a real-life situation in order to help set the assignment in context. In this case, the learner has been asked by a teacher to help run an after-school club for students interested in studying graphic design. The aim of the club is for students to gain an understanding of the different components of graphic design whilst experimenting with a range of techniques. You have access to an art classroom and a computer suite if needed to help produce resources to help run the club. After the scenario, there are some further details on the specific information that should be included. It is structured into smaller tasks and then outlines the way the evidence can be presented. We've tried to keep this open as much as possible to appeal to many different types of learners. Following this, the grading descriptors are given, which is what students need to do for that grade and what the assessor will be using when marking the assignment. In QualHub, there are a range of course file documents, including assessor documentation. Here is an example document for the assessor to give feedback to the learner, but you don't have to use these documents. Feedback can be given to the learners after the EQA visit has occurred. Feedback shouldn't be overly specific and directed, so it might be best to use the grading descriptors to assist with feedback. So for example, you might say something like, you have described X, but you need to explain the importance of X. Or you have used some key terminology, but you need to use the key terms more consistently throughout your work. Before performing any marking, you may want to go onto your qualification page on QualHub. On the Assessment tab, you will find some samples of coursework. This can be useful to see an example of pass or distinction piece of work, and can also inform your teaching when you have examples to show the level of detail that might be required. Now let's look at the marking and grading, and it's probably easiest done with an example. There are 4 units in the qualification, and within each unit there are learning outcomes. Each of those learning outcomes will need to be assessed and graded. So for the first learning outcome in graphic design, these are the grading descriptors. In this case, a pass is describing the graphic design components, but for a distinction, you must explain how they are linked. Then for learning outcome 2, there will be some different grading descriptors, and likewise for learning outcome 3. Let's say you have marked the Unit 1 assignment, and these are the grades achieved in each learning outcome: a pass, a merit, and a merit. The final grade for the unit will be the lowest grade the learner achieved in a learning outcome, so in this example, a pass. Each learning outcome has to be demonstrated at the same basic level of competency if we're to say that the overall unit is at that level of competency. There is no compensatory grading within the unit. When you've graded all the units, you can see there is a mix of grades achieved in the different units. The final grade won't be a pass, as there is compensatory grading when it comes to combining the units at the end and determining an overall grade. This is how the final grade is calculated, which can be found in the grading guide. UMS points are assigned to the different units, and the UMS points get added together for each unit and for the examined component. The total will tell you what grade the learner has achieved. Using those grades from the previous slide would give you these UMS numbers. In total, they will have achieved 155 UMS for the internal assessments. If they got a pass in their exam, only just, then their UMS is 120, which will bring their total UMS score to 275. Which places them on a level 2 pass. For a level 2 merit though, they would need 280 UMS marks. There is a range of UMS with the external assessment, so another learner might also have got a pass in the external assessment, but if they got a few more marks, then they could have a merit overall. The UMS is different for different subject areas due to the different amount of guided learning hours, but the calculation is the same. Thankfully though, you don't need to sit with a calculator working these out, because in QualHub, on the Assessment tab on your qualification page, you'll find the grading guide, which is what you've just seen on the last slide, and has information about how many UMS equates to what grade. Secondly, there is a grading calculator where you can select either the level 1 or the level 2 qualification, depending on which one that the learner is enrolled on. You can select the grades they achieved in the internal assessments and what they achieved in the exam, or what you predict if they haven't sat it yet, and it will calculate the estimated final grade for you. As our mission is to promote an advanced learning, we have several resources available to help and support you with that. The key area for support will be QualHub. qualhub.co.uk will be your primary go-to, where you can search for all our qualifications and access the specification, assessments, teaching materials, regulations and much more. You can begin typing your qualification subject area in or your qualification code, and it will give you a list of suggested qualifications. Let us begin by focusing on some of the teaching materials that are available on QualHub and are free to download. We have schemes of work which completely outline entire units of work based on 1 hour lessons. There are also individual lesson plans too, with suggested timings, lesson aims, learning outcomes, and suggested assessment activities. We have complete PowerPoint presentations covering the teaching content from the specification and includes teaching activities that could be used with your learners. And finally, there is a workbook for Unit 2 and individual worksheets to accompany the lessons, or they can be used as homework or flipped learning opportunities, whatever you decide. And as with all these resources, it is best to use them and adjust them to suit your learners. Using actual assessment material is a good way to make revision effective. And the material I'm going to show you now is also available on QualHub at no extra cost. For every qualification, you will find past or sample exam papers. You will also find the mark schemes, and they will say which assessment objectives are being addressed by the question. Furthermore, the Chief Examiner's report, which can be found in assessment materials on QualHub, does provide an insight to how learners perform nationally on the different questions. So, for example, which questions had strong answers, which questions were answered incorrectly, and what were the common errors, which can help inform your future teaching. We also have a sample portfolio for graphic design, which can help you understand the requirements of grading and provide guidance on how a portfolio could look in the chosen learning outcomes. You can also access various unit-specific webinars on our YouTube channel in the Training for Schools and V Certs playlist. The focus of these webinars are the content and assessment of the unit and contain samples of learners' work which are being graded at different levels. Another useful tool which is part of the NCFE group is Skills Forward. They are one of the UK's leading e-learning software and assessment solutions for functional skills, GCSEs, apprenticeships and employability skills. The unique assessments, resources and summative assessments can transform how education providers approach functional skills, GCSEs and the employability skills development of learners. But in terms of V-Certs though, the most useful part of Skills Forward is probably the Skills Portfolio. Skills Portfolio allows learners to submit evidence and keep records of their work, which will allow centres to manage, monitor and assess their learners remotely. The assessor is also able to upload evidence for the learners too, so for example witness statements for the internal assessments. It can allow for easy management of the quality assurance process and complies with Ofsted and the Education and Skills Funding Agency requirements, giving you the evidence needed during the inspection. Aside from the skills learners will gain from the V-Cert, we have also developed a suite of resources to support the wider curriculum and skills learners will need. These include 32 sessions, each lasting 2 hours, and they cover personal, social, health and economic education, study skills, and employability and career skills. These packs can be found within the teaching materials on QualHub. We have now reached the end of the webinar, so thank you for attending and I hope you have found this useful. If you do have any questions, then please do get in touch with me anytime directly using my email, kellyjohnson@ncfe.org.uk, or if I'm unavailable, our general email is curriculum@ncfe.org.uk. Thanks again, take care everyone and stay safe.